Sometimes us singers are guilty of the music being too loud or not singing in a comfortable vocal range. You guys don't get to hear the words. You smile. Kenneth Bailey smiles every Sunday. Can't hear a word I'm saying. Can you hear me now? Hey, Kenneth. I want you to be able to read the words. If you can't understand them, at least you can see them, okay? Seems like all I could see was the struggle. Haunted by ghosts that lived in my past. Bound up in shackles of all my failures. Wondering how long is this gonna last? Then you look at this prisoner and say to me, son, stop fighting a fight that's already been won. I am redeemed. He set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain, 'cause I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. All my life I have been called unworthy. Named by the voice of my shame and regret. Somebody see yourself there. But when I hear you whisper, child, lift up your head, I remember, oh God, you're not done with me yet. I am redeemed. He set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain. I'm not who I used to be, because I don't have to be home inside of me, 'cause his days long dead and gone. Because I've got a new name, new life I'm not the same. I hope that will carry me home. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain, 'cause I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. You set me free. So I'll shake off these heavy chains, wipe away every stain, 'cause I'm not who I used to be. Jesus, I'm not who I used to be. Jesus, I'm not who I used to be. I am redeemed. Thank God I'm redeemed.
Lord, have thine own way, as you have done so far today. Have thine own way. Because you are the potter, and I'm just the clay. James Cash Penney, he's a Missouri boy. Born in 1875 up in the northwest part of the state in a little town called Hamilton. During the first part of the 20th century, some of you know who this guy is, J.C. Penney presided over the most powerful empire, 1,700 stores, the largest chain in America. And although his enterprise made him incredibly wealthy, J.C. Penney's life was not devoid of setbacks and trouble. In fact, beginning in 1929, some of you know what happened that year. Events took place that nearly cost Penney his life. Great Depression struck the country, and it came at a time of great financial vulnerability for Penney, because in the good time before the Depression, he did like everyone else. Right? He overfinanced himself, and he overextended himself and borrowed heavily to finance all of this venture. But when the Depression hit, the banks come a calling, do they not? We want our money, and we want it sooner than we thought we would need it. And suddenly cash flow is tight, and Penney finds it difficult finding the ability to meet the payment schedule. He's constantly worrying, and unrelenting pressure begins to take its toll. He said, I was so harassed with worries, I couldn't sleep. Developed this extremely painful ailment, and he was concerned about his deteriorating health. And so he checked himself into the Kellogg Sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. Now, that's odd for us, but that was the Mayo Clinic of the era. That's where everybody went, okay? And there, Dr. Elmer Eggleston, the staff physician, examined Penney and declared, you know what? This guy's extremely ill. And Penney later recalled, rigid treatment was prescribed, but nothing helped. Constantly tormented by these periods of hopelessness and despair. His very will to live was eroding right before him. He says, I got weaker day by day. I was broken, nervous. I was physically broken, filled with despair, unable to see any ray of hope. Nothing to live for. Having a friend left in the world. My family has even turned against me. And he was alarmed, the doctor, by this sort of deteriorating health of Penney, and so he gave him a sedative. It quickly wore off, and Penney awakened with this conviction, this is going to be my last night of life. And so he got out of bed, and he wrote notes to his wife, and he wrote notes to his children. He said he didn't expect to live to see dawn. He's helpless. His bones are dry, right? Hope lost, completely cut off. Can these bones live? I also want to share a testimony with you of a single mother of 5 children. Her name, coincidentally, is also Penny. She says, my name is Penny, and I'm a single mother of 5 children, and 3 years ago, when my youngest son was 1 year old, I was in a relationship, and for someone for 10 years, but a succession of events just sort of destroyed the life that I'd known. And I felt that my life was good, and he had a decent job, but she was off welfare, and her world was in an upswing. But then her boyfriend fell back into his life of drugs, and it sort of captured him and overtook his life, and it left her to support her 5 kids alone. Then the apartment building where she lived was sold, and she was forced to move, and the only place she could find to move was into a 1-room motel. And the rent there was $324 a week. She had to pay $343, or excuse me, she made up $324 a week, and she had to pay $343. And so even though she worked 40 hours, she'd be cleaning rooms at night at the hotel, $3 for every room, to fill in the gap and actually to feed the children. She says, my 2 older children were attending the church's junior high ministry and finally convinced me to come to church, and I enjoyed it, and God started speaking to me, but my life became overwhelming. She said, it was so hard to see my children suffering because of me. And I just couldn't take care of them like a mother should. And one night she said, I was in the parking lot at the church, and I asked God, why have you given me these children when I'm unable to care for them? They're hungry and unhappy, and they're living in a 1-room motel. They're suffering because of my inability. I'm trying to fix things, but it's not working. God, should I give these children over to the state? And she just cried. 2 hours. Never got an answer. A few weeks went on past that evening, and she said she was falling deeper and deeper into despair, this hole that she couldn't get out of. And one day after work, she was at the end of her rope, barely able to feed the kids anything. They're arguing with each other, and she's stressed at work and has to go to work, cleaning these hotels room tonight, and there's no one to help us. She said, I sat down at the tiny little table in the motel room, and I just closed my eyes, and I prayed. And I prayed to God for strength. You know, I didn't want some kind of magical money sort of filling in the sky and magically appearing here. I needed some endurance to get through this season. I needed God to give my children some peace. Give me something that I'm going to make it. Hopelessness. Bones dried up, you know. Cut off completely. Can these bones live? We've come to the part of the story where the kingdom falls. And just a little bit back, the northern kingdom of Israel had 19 kings over their history of 200 years, roughly 200 years. All 19 were reprobate. Not one good king among them. They all led the people away from the Lord. And so because of their continued long disobedience, the Lord used the Assyrian Empire to thrust them from His presence. And after a siege that lasted 3 years, the capital of Samaria were breached, 27,000 people deported, mixed in with all of the other deportees from all other parts of the nation and the kingdom there, and lost forever, never heard from again, ceased being. We never hear from them. Southern kingdom of Judah, they extended another 150 years beyond that, and over their entire history they had about 20 kings. And all of them were degenerate, except 4. 4 of them. And if you fast forward to 397, I know it's a little history lesson, just indulge me for a minute, but the royal power has shifted from Assyria, with the capital in Nineveh, to Babylon, with its Babylonian capital in Babylon. And so there's a shift in royal power, and Babylon's flexing its muscle, and we find 2 deportations of the south. The first, they take some of the brightest, the best, the wealthy, and take them into Babylon. That is in Ezekiel's a part of that. A few years later, happened, there's a siege in Jerusalem, at the city there. And the Babylonian army sort of breached the wall. They're swarming in, and people are running for their lives, including the king Zedekiah. He's running for his life. And the Babylonian army pursue him, and they capture him and his sons, and they take him to Nebuchadnezzar, who's in the field command. And Nebuchadnezzar has Zedekiah's sons killed in front of him, right before his eyes, slaughtered. And then he puts Zedekiah's eyes out. And then he says his army commander set fire to the temple in Jerusalem and to the royal palace and to all the homes. They're burning Jerusalem, and they knock down all of the walls. Left behind only the poorest of the poor, the vineyards, the folks that work the land and work the vineyards. Jeremiah is among those folks left here. Now, it's hard for us to understand, Pastor, I don't get all this, that's good stuff, but I think it's hard for us to understand the significance of this defeat. It would be like ISIS coming to your country farm, your century farm, and capturing you, burning your barns, burning your home, and transporting you up north somewhere, I don't know, like Minnesota. They don't know what sweet tea is up there. They in Minnesota, they drink pop. Right? I mean, their biscuits and gravy come from a pop seal tube and a packet of mix. These northerners up there have no idea about fried taters and onions, apple butter, fried pies, delicacies of our home. And I know I may be pushing a bit, but I want you to understand that for Judah to lose their land and to lose the temple and to lose their sense of a nation would be even more dramatic and devastating than ISIS seizing our farms and worshiping in this church. Okay? Serious business. Folks left there said, how deserted the city. Once so full of people, how like a widow is she, who once was great among the nations. She who was queen among the provinces has become a slave. Among her lovers there is not one to comfort her. All friends have betrayed her. They've become her enemies. After affliction and harsh labor, Judah has gone into exile. Hopelessness, bones dried up, hope lost, cut off. Folks in Jerusalem felt that way. Folks in Babylon captivity felt that way. Ezekiel, that's where I'm getting to. Ezekiel's an interesting guy. Unlike other prophets around him, he sort of had these visions. He's sort of captured by the Lord, transported to places. And he had these visions of like chariots. And he was sort of in Babylon, but transported somehow into Jerusalem, took this magic trip and could see everything there. He had this vision of a new temple. But most famously, he saw this valley of dry bones. And if you have the story, it's on page 246. If you're in your Bibles, Ezekiel 37. I'm just going to read it. 14 verses. The hand of the Lord was upon me, brought me out of the Spirit, by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me in the middle of this valley, full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry, he says. And he asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. And he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life. I will attach tendons to you, and make flesh come upon you, and cover you with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will come to life. Then you will know that I am the Lord. And so I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, or a rattling sound. The bones came together, bone to bone. I looked there, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there's no breath in them. And he said to me, prophesy now to the breath. Prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Come, breath, from the four winds, and breathe into this slain, that they may live. And so I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them, and they came to life and stood up on their feet, a vast army. And then, he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the people of Israel. They're the ones who say our bones are dried up, that our hope is gone, we are cut off. Therefore prophesy to them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, my people, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from them. I will bring you back from the land of Israel. Then you, my people, will know that I am the Lord. When I open your graves and bring you up from them, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live. And I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken. I have done it, declares the Lord. And so Ezekiel's in Babylon, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, and he has this hand of the Lord, and he sort of takes him to this valley. And there in the valley, it's not really important about the location, but what's important is what he sees there. Massive collection of sun-bleached, sun-baked bones just glistening all over the place. And to get the full impact, the Lord leads him back and forth through this valley so he can see the massiveness. And it's missing in the English, but Ezekiel's astonished. He's amazed at the number of bones here. Notice also that these valleys are lying on the surface of the valley. These dead were denied proper burial, left for scavengers like buzzards, wild beasts to lick the bones clean. Notice also their dryness. These folks here have been dead a long time. There's no life in them at all. Picture of death, horror, in the intensity and finality. And after drinking all of this in, Ezekiel, the Lord says to him, can these bones live? That's a ridiculous question, Lord. Ridiculous. I know there's some stories about Elijah and Elisha sort of bringing people back to life, but there's no way these bones can come back to life. The answer is no. But that's not what he says. Sort of holds out, maybe all things are possible with the Lord. Maybe the Lord is sort of control over life and death, and so he says, only you know, Lord. I just want to pause from the story for just a moment and pay attention here. Because in this entire episode, these are the only words that Ezekiel speaks in terms of being quoted. I know that he's telling the story And I know that he's prophesying, but all the words belong to the Lord, not to Ezekiel. In this entire sequence, the only words that Ezekiel says are, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. And when you're faced with a hopeless situation, you're in this valley filled with dry bones, completely cut off, hush. Hush. Because what God says is more important than what you say. You know, I mean, sometimes we're wondering about our next move. Lord, what are we going to do next? I mean, we're talking the situation to death. We're worrying, woe is me. What am I going to do? How is this happening? Why me? On and on. And really what we need is just some silence. God, what he says about these dry bones, what God says about our hopelessness is more important than anything that you can say. And so, on God's behalf, Ezekiel addresses the dry bones, as if they're a living audience, just speaking to them. And the bones begin reconnecting sinew, and they form skeletons, and these skeletons become corpses, and flesh cover them, and corpses become sort of this army as the skin covers them, this reversal of the decomposition process. Bones are rattling. It's going fast. Everything's happening here. Just things are going along fine. Everything's finding its proper place. But then it all seems to just stop all of a sudden. There's one problem here, Lord. There's no breath in these bones, on these corpses now, lying on the ground here. And the Lord says, well, prophesy to the breath. And what I see, and some other folks see, is this sort of divine breath from the four corners of the earth, giving life to all creatures. The sovereign of the universe summons the winds to direct his life-giving energy into these corpses lying on the valley. And the breath entered their bodies, and they came to life, and then they stood on their feet. This exceedingly numerous dry bones, now an exceedingly vast host, an army. Can these bones live? And again, just let me pause here in the story and note that these dead did not rise from the floor because they were biologically reconstituted. They were back together, still lying in the valley. These dead did not rise because of some internal force. The dead came to life and rose to their feet only after God infused them with his life-giving breath. And this sort of reminds us of the creation story. You might remember back in the day when God formed Adam, the very beginning, from the dust, and the soil was molded to form this man lying there. This lump did not become a living being until God breathed his life-giving breath into that dust. And when we're faced with hopelessness and dry bones cut off completely, things will never really change until God brings his life into the situation. I mean, J.C. Penney, he checked himself into the leading institution of the day. Doctors doing their best. He seems to be going deeper and deeper into despair, however, just lying in the valley still. God has yet to breathe into his bones. And Penny, she started going to church and she worked and did the best that she could, but things really weren't changing. I mean, her kids were hungry and cramped and fighting and exhausted. She just lying there in the valley. No breath. And you may need the breath of God. Breathe life into your situation. And so Ezekiel prophesies to the bones, prophesies to the breath, and then he speaks to the people eventually, right? Whose bones have been dried up, who are hopeless and completely cut off. And the scene shifts from the valley to a cemetery. Did you catch that? Looking at a cemetery now. He says to these exiles, I'm going to open your graves and bring you out. That means an opening of tombs. Family graves hewn from rock, reopened for every family member that died. Now the stone will be rolled away so the dead can come out. I'm going to open your graves and bring you out. The soil covering all of those folks would be removed. I'm going to open the graves and bring you out. God is a tomb robber like no other. And he's not searching for gold and silver. He's searching for souls. He's searching for souls. God alone is able to bring hope to despairing people. central Christian story of hope is the resurrection. Jesus willingly laid down his life, nailed to a cruel cross. He suffered in agony. He died. He was buried in the tomb. All hope lost. Darkness is won. The light of the world snuffed out. Can these bones live? No. But on the third day, the surprising reversal of events. Stone was rolled away. Grave clothes folded there, left behind. Mary Magdalene and some of her friends come to the garden. And they're greeted by an angel. Do you remember where he's sitting? On the stone. Sitting on the stone. Don't be afraid. I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has been raised. And the destination of your soul is at stake. Because Resurrection Day is coming. I've sort of studied it, and I'm not exactly sure of how it's all going to work out, and Scripture gives us a glimpse of it, but there's enough mystery in there that reminds us that we've got to just remain faithful and trust in God alone. But through faith in Jesus Christ, His resurrection from the grave, your soul can live with Jesus forever. Amen. And inviting Him into your life, and asking Him forgiveness of your sins, confessing His name, Jesus, believing in your heart, you can be saved. And when Christ comes into you, don't forget this. He brings change, does He not? Something called new life. Right? The old has gone. Behold, all things become new. And if your soul is lying in the valley, just breathless, turn to Jesus, my friends, in faith. And know that invigorating, that empowering, soul-changing event of God's breath breathed into your soul, new life, salvation. Can these bones live? Now, the story of the resurrection isn't just about reserved for Resurrection Day then. It's also about life now, about here. Because the resurrection informs our view of hopelessness. Did God breathe life into the dry bones, causing them to stand as a vast army? In vision. Did God raise Jesus from the grave? What can God do for dry bones? Penny, she prayed in the motel room that night, asked for endurance. Just get through this, Lord. You got to get me through this season. And she says, after I prayed, I lifted my head and I just took a deep breath. And right at that moment, there was a knock at the door. 2 people from the care team at the church brought me a mug, she says, filled with candy. And she cried. And she says, there's still hard times, but God gave me strength to find a new life, and I keep that cup in my car. It's a reminder that when we're at our lowest, helpless, and broken, if we turn to God, He will bring us that cup. Can these bones live? J.C. Penney finished his letters to his wife and his children, and he actually fell asleep. Woke up the next day, surprised, to find himself alive still, and he began making his way down this corridor of a hospital, and he could hear the singing. And they had this little chapel there where daily devotions were held, and they sort of were singing, and the words of this hymn that he heard spoke deeply to him. So he went into the chapel, he listened to the singing, he listened to the scripture and the lessons and the prayers, and he said, suddenly something happened. I wish that to be your story. Suddenly something happened. I can't explain it. I can only call it a miracle. Because I felt as if I had been instantly lifted out of this darkness of a dungeon into this warm, brilliant sunlight. I felt as if I had been transported from hell into paradise. I felt the power of God as never before. And he goes on to say that the most dramatic and glorious 20 minutes of my entire life were those I spent in the chapel that morning. Can these bones live? I'm going to invite Mike to come. I'm going to invite you to stand. I'm going to pray, And then we're going to sing the hymn that spoke eloquently and miraculously to J.C. Penney. It might just be the words that you need to hear today. Let's pray. Lord, you know, we've all been in hopeless situations. Maybe today, maybe some point, but we've all been bone dry, completely cut off. And we've all wondered, Lord, can these bones live? And you spoke the vision of life and resurrection to your people through the prophet Ezekiel, and you see desperate situation around us, and the answer is no! These bones cannot live, Lord. There is no hope. But, Lord, you are no ordinary God. Because you do bring the dead back to life. You put bone with sinew, with flesh, with skin, and these bones remain corpses until you breathe, your breath enters us. O Spirit of the living God, I pray that you would breathe on us today. Breathe on these dry bones and bring us back to life. Spirit of the living God, breathe on us. Call the graves to open their doors and release us from captivity. So that the answer is yes. Yes, these dry bones can live. The dead can be raised. And Jesus, we stand here today before you in reverent worship. And we acknowledge your holiness. You are sovereign Lord of all creation. And you will take care of us. know that when you're faced with a valley of dry bones, the first step might just be to hush and listen to what God might be trying to say to you. And it probably is more important than what you're saying about it. I would also want you to know that things really aren't going to change until God breathes His life into that situation. You can stay on that valley a long time until God's breath comes into you. You can stay in it. And I also want you to remember that God alone is able to bring hope to despairing people. May you know that hope too. And as you leave from this place, I pray that you will go with God's very own breath breathing in you every word that you say, every thought that you have, and every deed that is done this week. May it be done in the power of God's Spirit, with grace and peace. Amen.